Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the first Frank Rhodes lecture for this academic year. My name is Minu A. I'm the Vice Chair and Managing Director of the University Design Institute here at ASU, and we host these lecture series each year. Welcome to you all. Thank you for spending your Friday afternoon with us, and a special welcome to our speaker, Dr. Freeman Hrabowski. We are so delighted to have you. And Freeman, in the last couple of weeks, I've discovered that you have many fans here at ASU. So a lot of people are very excited for you to be here. So as we get going, I just wanted to lay out the schedule for the session. I'll quickly introduce the lecture itself. For those of you that are unfamiliar with the lecture or new to ASU, Dr. Crow will then introduce Dr. Hrabowski. He will speak for about 20 minutes or so, and then we will have a discussion. You'll notice that there is no chat function that's available to the community. Please put your questions into the Q&A section at the bottom of the screen. I will make sure to grab as many of those questions as possible so we can have a rich conversation. We recognize that not everybody can make it, and not everybody is able to be available at this particular time. Please know that these lectures are recorded. They will be available on the Frank Rhodes site at ASU. Please feel free to share with your colleagues at ASU so that the extended community can take advantage of the insights and perspectives that our speaker will bring today. When we began the series, it used to be in person. During COVID, we went to online lectures, and we've stayed that way because we recognize that more people can participate this way. So we will find ways to welcome our speakers and scholars into our community in person at a time of their convenience. But we really wanted to create a platform where as many can participate at the same time, and then many, many more can take benefit of the recordings. So a quick overview of the lecture series itself. For those of you that may be new to the Arizona State University community, or those of you that are attending one of these for the first time. So Dr. Crow created this lecture series in 2011 in honor of Dr. Frank Rhodes, who served as president of Cornell University from 1977 to 1995. Dr. Rhodes is considered one of the most impactful university presidents of the 20th century, and he was driving a vision to fundamentally change education and the cultural landscape of higher education. During his almost 22 years at Cornell, he changed the course of the university with unfailing drive and perseverance to bolster student and faculty diversity. Significantly more women and minority faculty members and minority students had opportunities during his term. Research funding increased from 88 million to over 300 million annually. He led successful fundraising campaigns to redesign the Cornell landscape that generations have benefited from since then. In 2001, he published a book called The Creation of the Future, which discussed the responsibilities and possibilities of American higher education. His ideas were really important, and Dr. Crow in particular was really inspired by some of these ideas, and they sort of were built into the concept that he then brought to ASU and then has shared with higher education in the country. So we honor Dr. Frank Rhodes and his vision to fundamentally change the landscape of higher education through these series. So then who are our speakers who will then follow in the footsteps of Dr. Rhodes? Our speakers are people that we think are leaders and experts in their field and who are pushing the evolution of 21st century higher education in this country. They're individuals who have advanced bold ideas and who have created change within their spheres of influence, and also people who will force us all to think about what we should be doing within our institution as ASU evolves into the future. So these lectures are meant to inspire, inform, and educate us as we design this the ASU enterprise into the many versions of what we need to be, and to really continue this trajectory of transformation that we are on. And we are honored and privileged to have Dr. Freeman Hrabowski with us, who really meets every definition of a leader who has boldly changed higher education and is an inspiration to so many here at the ASU community and beyond. I will turn it over to our tech team to share a video from Dr. Crow introducing our speaker today. Dr. Crow was unfortunately unavailable to be here in person, so let's play the video and welcome Dr. Hrabowski.
Hi, Michael Crow here. It really is a great honor for me to introduce the Frank Rhodes lecture series again. We've been doing this lecture series for many years in honor of one of the progenitors of some of the logic that underlies the design of ASU as the new American university, Frank Rhodes, who was the president of Cornell University for many years and who wrote a seminal piece on designing universities to help create future outcomes of our society and of our democracy. And when Frank wrote this, he really was apologizing for all the things that he thought that Cornell University or other universities should have been doing and that we weren't doing. That is, being adaptive to the population, being engaged in a broad demographic or with a broad demographic of the population. And so we're in the middle of this, this massive design project at ASU that's been going on now for more than 20 years, the building of the new American university. And as a part of that, we invite in the seminal thinkers to help us to continue that process. And in Freeman Hrabowski, we have that. You know, one of the most significant academic leaders in the history of the United States, certainly the most visible, transformative leader of the last 50 years with his work at the University of Maryland at Baltimore County, his development of the broad accessibility to the highest levels of academic achievement, but also just his logic about how you must build institutions that engage the entirety of society. That this notion that we have not achieved all that we can achieve as a society because we've left so many people out. We've left out so many ideas. We've empowered fewer people from narrower perspectives, and therefore we have fewer solutions and narrower solutions for the challenges that lie in front of us. Freeman is one of these individuals who is capable of tying together history, culture, cultural transformation, his own historical and cultural and sociological experiences into an analysis and a story that helps us all not to better see the past, but to better, from seeing the past, see the future. And so what I'm hoping for in today's lecture is that Freeman's multi-decadal reflections of the past 50 years in higher education can help us really to see the future, to see the pathway forward. So really excited to have Freeman here. Freeman is ASU honorary doctorate recipient, also a longstanding ally, friend and colleague and intellectual mentor for me. And it's really an honor and a privilege to have Freeman Hrabowski here for the Frank Rhodes lecture. Thank you.
And with that welcome, Freeman, let me turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Emo. Thank you very much. That was quite an introduction. One might say that gives me goosebumps because there's a lot of pressure there from the things that he said, but he is my friend, and so he can be a little biased in talking about me. Let me start by saying I'm honored to be speaking here. I take great pride in saying that I am an honorary alumnus of the institution. And so when people are talking about Arizona State, I'm very comfortable in speaking about Michael's leadership and all of what all of you are doing there. And I'm comfortable in saying that you are so wise as an institution as to know that you can be even better. And one of the points that I want to make today is that any university that is on this path towards excellence, that is working to help more and more students, appreciates the fact that all of us have work to do. There's more that we can do. I want to, first of all, commend Michael for using Frank Rhodes, a luminary in higher education, as an example of excellence and what he did. There's a quote that I found that Frank said that said, "Knowledge humanely applied makes human progress possible." excuse me, knowledge humanely applied makes human progress possible. And so I'm talking today about leadership, empowerment, resilience in higher education, reflections on not 50, but I want to change that to 60 years when I thought about it, because I'm going to go back to my own story. I often say that we are all products of our own stories, our own childhood experiences, and I will use some of those as I talk today. It was in 1963 that I'm sitting in the back of a church as a 12-year-old, not wanting to be there. And my parents wanted me to hear this gentleman talk. And the man says at the lectern, this minister says that if the children participate in this peaceful protest, all of America will understand that even our children know the difference between right and wrong, and they want a better education. And all of a sudden, I look up. I had been doing my math. My parents were placating me with the two things I loved most: food. I was eating M&Ms, the good kind with the peanuts, and math. I got goosebumps doing math. I was doing my algebra. And I looked up, and this guy said, and our children will be able to go to better schools. And I really looked up, and he meant, of course, the white schools. And I said, what's his name again? And his name, of course, was Dr. Martin Luther King. And I went home and said, I'd like to participate in this march. And my parents said, absolutely not. I told them they were hypocrites. They sent me to my room. The next day they came in and they did allow me to go. I did go. It was an empowering experience, horrific, but empowering. I spent a week in jail, and the experience taught me what Dr. King meant when he said that tomorrow can be better than today, but only if we make it so. And so from an early age, I began to understand that part of leadership is understanding that, quite frankly, we have the capacity, each of us, to make the world better and different. And in my book, my colleagues and I wrote a book that's now a couple of years old called The Empowered University. And the notion is that, first of all, it's not about one person, it's about all of us collectively. And the first sentence says just that. It's not about me, it's about us, but that we should be empowered to look in the mirror at self and to recognize we have strengths, but there are ways in which we can be better. Well, Frank Rhodes and Michael Crow both get that point. That point is that we are doing some things well in higher education, but we can be better. And I appreciate Michael's point that we want to bring in people and think about Frank's approach, President Rhodes' approach to considering ways in which we can be better. My hero at that same time, and I had great respect for Frank Rhodes, was a contemporary of Frank Rhodes, Ernie Boyer. Interestingly enough, they both were presidents in the state of New York in the 70s. Frank became president of Cornell in 1977, and Ernie became president, the head of the State University of New York system in 1970, and was there for 7 years, and then became Commissioner of Education for the country, and did some amazing things for the country, and actually began to do something that inspired me in an early age, in my 80s, in the 80s rather, when I watched his emphasis on connecting pre-K through 12 with universities. And by the early 90s, he too was writing about the future of education. And he wrote a book entitled The New American College. And so that was that trend in that period, in the 90s through the first part of the next century, on what's the future of higher education. And he served as the chair of our Shriver Center, named after Sergeant Eunice Shriver, which I created shortly after becoming president in the early 90s at UMBC. And the notion was that we wanted to rethink what we could do as a young university. We had the privilege, when I became president, the university was only about 25 years old. And the question is, if you don't have everything set, if you have the chance to bring in a lot of new people, and you know that the institution is ready for some changes, what will you do? And so we did several things. Number one, we went and visited, of all places, the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology, because there had been $2 billion put into that institution. And we wanted to understand what they had done, because they had taken two of my best scientists. One had become the provost there, and one was chair biology. And of all the things I saw there that was absolutely fascinating to me, their emphasis was on bringing in the very best people and allowing them to think totally out of the box about how they might do things. And one of the examples was to think about how to work collectively in the sciences, so that it wasn't just a matter of every person, every lab having its own equipment, but how they could think collectively about going in together to buy bigger pieces of equipment that could solve problems in interdisciplinary ways. And another one was about not just trying to get all the books. This was back in the 90s, early 90s, and thinking so much just about volumes, but about how to be creative in the use of technology in the library. And the woman who was over the library had been, quite frankly, borrowed, stolen from Caltech. And I was fascinated with this combination of brain power, creating the new approach, being totally rebellious about how things would be done. And I wanted to be a leader who would say to my colleagues, let's break the mold. Let's try things differently, and let's look at what's possible. Well, in that period, starting all the way back to the 60s, after I had been in jail, what I learned was that I wanted to understand what was happening in our society. And I could ask you questions right now about that period. Probably the most surprising question to you would be, what percent of the people on this Zoom call right now had not even been born in the 60s? And when I was working with the chair in the Obama Commission on Educational Excellence for African Americans, some of the younger people in the White House said, well, why should that matter? Why would you put that in an article, something about who was born? And I asked the question, how many of you remember how you felt when 9/11 occurred? And do you think your children who were not born in that period in 2001 would have the same feeling? And of course they said they would not. And the point is this, that whether you know it or not, the majority of you on this call probably were not in the world in the 60s. And so it's hard for you to believe this, but only 10% of Americans had graduated from college in the mid 60s. And if you broke it down by race, in America at that time, people only talked about blacks and whites, the Census Bureau, only just as people still were talking about black and white TV, for example. And I bring that up because it meant only about 3% of blacks, but only 11% of whites had graduated from college. People honestly didn't think their kids would go to college and graduate. And you could see that all the way back to what we call the GI Bill in the 40s. Who do you think who were the people against Roosevelt and the GI Bill? Of all people, it was presidents, not like Michael and me. No, we would want people to go to college, but the most prestigious, the presidents of Chicago and Harvard, said, if you allow veterans into our universities, our institutions will become academic hobo jungles. And so here you had the most intellectually enlightened people in our society against veterans, primarily white guys, regular white guys going to college. We had a few women, a few minorities, but mainly white guys. And that was in the 40s. It was only until they allowed that GI Bill to go through and 2 million veterans went to college and did a good job, that society was ready in the higher education world and in society with Congress. Right after I had gone to jail for two things that happened: the Civil Rights Act in 64, the Higher Education Act in 65, the Voting Rights Act in 65, and the world changed. And so by the time the early 70s came with the Pell Grant Act, society was ready for many more people to go to college. And so today, unlike in the 60s with 10%, we had moved to, believe it or not, today we have about a third of Americans with a 4-year degree. But if you think about it, if I'd asked you that question, all of you who are in universities, that question, you probably would have said there was a much higher percentage of people with college degrees. And what is my point? That we in institutions, and ASU is somewhat different because you really are reaching out around the world and reaching out into communities, but most of us in higher education are more contained, and we are not so much involved in the communities in substantive ways. And so very few people really appreciate the fact that the majority of Americans today have never seen anyone in their families graduate from college. And you break it down, we now have it broken down by different racial and ethnic groups. For the fastest growing group in our country, Hispanics or Latinx, the fact is only about 20% have graduated from a four-year institution. For Blacks, it's about 28%. For whites, it's about 41%. For the Asian population, it's slightly over 50%. You put it all together, you're still talking about only a third of Americans. And the real challenge is it's really difficult, more than ever, for first-generation college students to succeed for financial reasons, but also because of academic preparation. And so what are we talking about? We are saying, and what I'm saying to you today is that when you look at the political divide we have in our country, when you look at health disparities, when you look at the academic achievement challenges in our society, when you look at the economic disparities, what you see is this growing division based on the level of education. I should mention that it's wonderful that we've got a strong and growing and developing community college system, and they are important. And it's also important that everybody shouldn't have to go to a four-year institution. Jobs for the Future talks about post-secondary opportunities. But make no mistake, the media will tell you over and over again, as the public will say, does a college education matter? Is it worth it? I would argue that we in the higher education sector, particularly those in universities, have not become effective in answering that question. Because I would argue that the fact is that if you show me a family that has had success with one or two of the children graduating from college, I will show you a family that is determined that the others will graduate if they are with any interest at all and have done fairly well in high school. And the real challenge is that for families that have not had that success, and for families that have had kids go to college or where the parents have gone and did not graduate, and I'm talking about millions and millions of Americans, when they did not graduate, either because of financial bills and loans or because they flunked out, it was not a good experience, and bad news travels fast. And so many Americans, we might even say over half, don't feel good about colleges and universities. Now you add to that what we see on TV and the condescending way, I use that word deliberately, the condescending way that we who are educated talk to and about people who are not educated. And you get a sense of why there's this disdain for those of us with degrees. And I would argue that, as Ernie Boyer talked about the American college, the new American college in the early 90s, as he was the head, after being over the Commission on Education and becoming the head of the Carnegie Foundation for the Advancement of Teaching and Learning, that he was saying we must put meat into this mechanism that looks at this relationship between universities and pre-K through 12. If you get a chance, look at an article that came out in April that my colleagues and I wrote on the past 30 years of social impact of my campus, UMBC, on social impact on the larger community. And it's in the Harvard publication Social Impact Review from their Advanced Leadership Institute. And it looks at some of the examples that we're looking at, from issues involving healthcare in our state to academic achievement to the notion of one that we're really known for: how do we show the country that you can produce scientists of color? And what we were able to show was that changing the culture of the institution can lead to amazing success. When I talk about culture, I'm talking about what Eric Weiner mentions in his book, The Geography of Bliss, that culture is the sea we swim in, so all-consuming that we fail to recognize it until we step out of it and look back at it. It's the same idea of looking in the mirror at ourselves. And so as I think about what we do in looking at our structure and looking at who we are as a university, as UMBC, as Arizona State, the question is, are we in agreement about not only who we are, but who we want to become? Are we in agreement about what we do well, but also where we have challenges? Are we able to say we don't just want to be hyped, Yes, we do some things well, but there are areas where we're not as strong, where we can be much better. We knew we needed to work on such things as graduation rates, but I wrote an article with colleagues on beyond the numbers, beyond getting graduation rates up. And we are now a Research One campus, yeah, and we're doing well, but we knew we had to do much better with students in science and engineering. If you look at my TED Talk, you will see the vast majority of students of all races who begin in science and engineering will leave it within the first year or two. In fact, we call STEM, we call the STEM courses, first 2 years, weed out courses. NSF recognizes that. We've been working on it, but we have a long way to go. We have these innovation courses that we develop, course redesign. If you look on our campus at the CDC, it's not for Center for Disease Control, it's for the Chemistry Discovery Center. We have rethought, and that's the role of faculty, how we teach chemistry, both the first and second years. If you look at our Meyerhoff program, you'll see what we do with what we do in the TED Talk in terms of high expectations, not just of the students, but giving support to faculty in professional development and looking at the role of community and supporting the idea of getting away from a cutthroat environment in science, how we learn to work in groups, since the best problem solving occurs that way, how we think about the fact that it takes researchers to build researchers or artists to produce artists. And then the notion that we have to evaluate with sincerity how we do what we do and the extent to which the outcomes are what we want them to be. You know, Bill Fahey, who was the head of the CDC for under 2 presidents from different parties, says that if you want to be effective in any initiative, you must first be clear on the vision and the outcome. What is it you're trying to achieve? And what we wanted to do, and what any institution has to do, is to be able to state clearly, where are we going? Who is it we want to be? We were determined to have social justice as a part of our mission, to be clear about seeking the truth, to be very clear about what we meant by inclusion. And the new book that's coming out that my colleagues have now written, again with Hopkins Press, is called The Resilient University, and it focuses on purpose and inclusion. I am convinced that with all of the political challenges we face, particularly in some states in our country, and I'm going around now that I'm no longer the president at UMBC, to states where universities are having a really difficult time with such language as DEI. And I'm talking about this word inclusion more than ever. And looking at the demographics in our country, most people don't know that the population, the demographic that is literally had the biggest reduction in people going to college, quite frankly, will be white males, working class, low income, white males. And so being able to think about inclusion for every group, including women and LGBTQ and Black and Latinos and others, Native Americans, it's going to be, I think, the way we continue to make progress in having everyone involved. Because just as in the 40s, when the presidents would talk about college not being for everyone, and just as in the 20s, back in the 1920s, women couldn't vote, and we had that progress in the 60s, that we finally had not only women voting from the 1920s, and then more Blacks in the 60s. Now we find ourselves in these challenges in such a way that we're having to fight some of those battles. The question is, what role should universities play? And so it's not just about having students graduate. What are we doing to make sure that our students are prepared to be involved in these fights, these battles, these struggles? You know, it is amazing that Fred Lawrence, the head of the Phi Beta Kappa, Secretary of Phi Beta Kappa, says that the whole purpose of education is to make sure that our students are able to present their arguments based on sound logic, to be able to listen to other points of view and to look at the evidence that's supporting those other points of view, and then to be able to find the common ground. I would argue that too often in our society and in our institutions, without our realizing it, we teach people to fend for themselves and to win for ourselves. That we have to think about in our culture, how do we teach people to connect meaningfully with others, to build trust, to learn how to collaborate. And our book talks about just that, about collaboration and being able to be adaptable and being able to hear other points of view, and to realize no one side, no one TV station, no one party is totally right. And that there are values that we should be able to find that can give us a chance to think about what's really important when thinking about what's at the core of who we are. And so I want you to think clearly about who is ASU? What do you do well? We all know you're scaling up and you're doing great work, but where are the areas where you can be better? This is what the line we use at UMBC is: success is never final. You know, I am very proud. My passion personally, as I close, has been to show this country and the world that we can produce students of color who can be the very best in science and engineering, and who can be literate and appreciative of the humanities and the arts and the social sciences, and to realize it's not arts and humanities or science and engineering, that it's the genius of the and versus the tyranny of the or. That's Jim Collins. That's not me. I wish it were me. And the key here is that I'm so proud that UMBC produced this young woman who worked and was the co-leader of the team at NIH that produced the Moderna vaccine, Tismika Corbett, young woman that I recruited from rural North Carolina at 17. And now she's on the faculty at Harvard, but she helped NIH and was the leader of that team with Bonnie Graham to produce that Moderna vaccine. First Black woman in the world to create a vaccine. Gives me goosebumps. Never before. And my vision, the vision my colleagues and I have for Mile Hall, is that one of those students will be the first Black to actually get the Nobel Prize in Science and Medicine. Now, that's the vision we have for those young people. I know you have visions like that too. I said to Michael, when I look at the Hispanic population, and one of our articles is on producing bachelors who are going to get PhDs, we are the #1 producer of Blacks who are going to get PhDs in science and engineering in the country, and the #1 producer of Blacks who get PhDs and MD PhDs, and only 20% of my students are Black. And I said, I challenge ASU, as I close, to increase the number of Latinos, Latinx, or Hispanics who go on to get PhDs in the natural sciences and engineering. You're in the top 30, but you're at the bottom, which means you're not even producing 5 per year. And I know you can be better than that. And when I said it to Michael, he was on it. And I know whatever Michael and his colleagues there decide to be on something to do it, you can be the best. Right now, the top producers are 2 campuses at University of Puerto Rico, and mainland is UTexas, El Paso. And they are producing not quite 20 per year, who go on and complete PhDs. I know that Arizona State can set the tone and the standard there, because we need so many more. And that's just one area, but I give you that as a challenge, as we have taken on challenges of that kind. So I leave you with the idea that to watch your thoughts, they become your words become your actions become your habits become your character. Watch your character, it becomes your destiny, dreams and values. Arizona State University, you're such a special place with a special leader, and you can all be much better. Thank you. Ready for questions?
All right, Freeman, you packed so much into such a short period of time, so much to discuss. I can see all the emojis of appreciation floating up the screen here. So clearly your message has resonated with the community. I'm going to invite all of our participants to start putting questions in. There's a lot to unpack here, and we have the time for a real good dialogue.
Great.
Exercise my privilege as a moderator to ask the first question. You talked about universities needing to embed social justice as part of the mission as we all look into the future. How do you define social justice, and what would it look like for a university, a public institution in particular, to embrace that mission of social justice?
Yes. You know, when I look at the data for students of color, for students from low-income backgrounds, what we know is that they are, first of all, they tend to be in zip codes where the schools are not high achieving. We know that. We know that they're in zip codes where the percent of those going to college or those who go to college and graduate will be lower than middle class zip codes. We know that the percent of those who will either go and move into prison or get records and don't get good jobs again. And for me, social justice, and in general for anybody, would be that we're in a society where a baby's chances of having a good life, of being able to get an education, get a good job, being able to take care of self will be reasonably high regardless of zip code. I start there. Regardless of race or gender or income of parents or education of parents, that we have a kind of infrastructure, foundation in our society to give that child the support, because I always go back to the children. I start there so that that child can, and for me, it goes back to reading, ability to read and think, to have a sense of self, and to have the ability to be in an environment where they have goals that focus on getting an education. A part of the program that nobody knows enough about on my campus is our choice program. If you look at the UMBC choice program that we started at the same time as we started the MILE program, and we started it in that Travis Center, it's for first-time offenders, children between the ages of 8 and about 15, 16. And these are children who've committed nonviolent crimes who go to court, and the judge gives that mother or grandmother the opportunity. You can either go into the UMBC program or you go to jail. And usually they will come to our program. It's not residential, but we take care of those children 24 hours a day. We make sure they're up in the morning doing school. And the reason we've been able to keep it over 30-some years is we can show statistically the child has a much greater chance of not going to jail because of being in that program. We need intervention programs for children who've gotten into difficulty, but we need so many more programs to make sure children don't start in that path of going on to jail. Social justice means a society that thinks about what do we do to ensure our children have a reasonable chance of succeeding in our society. For me, that's what it means.
That's, great to hear you talk about the things that you've done to grab kids early.
Yeah.
Prevention is better than cure. And also suggesting that universities have a role to play in watching for some of these issues and using programming resources and the tools we have to engage.
Yep.
Here is a question then from somebody in our audience who is listening to you talk about training people to think collectively. The question is, for those who've been forged in the context of individualism and competition, how do you teach them the meaning and power of collective work? I mean, goes back to the social justice piece. What are some of the most effective lessons for that mindset shift? And I would love to hear you speak about some of the things that you've done, Freeman. In one of our earlier conversations, you talked about creating dialogue on your campuses and bringing people together. Yes. What does it really mean to push that kind of a mindset shift on our campuses?
So it's such a great question. I first of all, I give a math problem, a 6th grade math problem to CEOs, to bright students, to faculty. And the problem says, and I get goosebumps giving math problems. So let me just say that. I'm the ultimate nerd. 29 children are in a class, 20 have dogs, 15 have cats. How many have both a dog and a cat? And I'll just stop a few minutes and see what people will do. And the first thing is, nobody thinks about working with somebody else. Everybody starts working, right? Because we're all 20th century learners, right? You think you're cheating if you work with somebody. I never say you can't work with somebody else, but I don't care who they are, that nobody does it. Now, my mile horse, the students that we have been working with, and the students on campus, they will start talking about it with each other because they've been prepared to do that. In the sciences now and enlightened places, people have students working in groups, and artists work. I mean, there's a time when an artist will work alone, but in the theater and other places, people begin to, and the social scientists are doing that more and more. We know that some of the richest problem solving and creations will come when people connect and work together. on problems. And when you look at, even when people get the Nobel Prize and whatever, you see teams of people working on problems. And when you go to companies and when you're working for nonprofits in society, people work together. It's not that there are times when an individual can do beautiful work, but you see more and more productivity from the connecting among people, because one person brings one idea, another, and you get away from the idea that you can't get serious work done in the group, because high achieving students are taught, well, if I get into that group, they'll start playing around. So we really had to work to come up with rules that groups would use. For example, no playing around in the group, time for breaks when you can do other things. You don't come to the group until you have done, you've tried to know what you know and what you don't know. You're ready to explain with clarity what you do understand and to have a good question and those kinds of things. That's number one. But the other part is, and we've a lot of professional development on the campus, a lot of money for professional development for faculty who wanted to look at ways of encouraging group work and collaboration in their classrooms. A lot of conversations among faculty, a lot of awards to faculty who do this and who can then work with other faculty. And then for my 20th anniversary as president, I was there for 30, but for my 20th anniversary as president, they decided to raise money for innovation awards so that faculty could get grants to have more release time, and sometimes with others to reflect on creating new courses or new experiences for students, and even money that can help to experiment and to have pilots. You know, they wanted to name it after me. I did not want it named after me because I said that makes you feel like you're dead when people name. They nevertheless named the Hrabowski Innovation Grants, but it was amazing how many conversations people had on everything from a Shakespeare scholar and a mathematician coming up with a course and a play called The Mathematics of Being Human, to a historian and a computer scientist developing a game based on the riots of Freddie Gray in the same area where the 1861 Civil War was fought in Baltimore. A game development that was then to be used by high school teachers, you see, and all these different fascinating connecting across disciplines, conversations. And then the other, I would say, is this, connected to innovation, but also to people in groups. The big question you have to ask is the campus one that encourages people to get involved in the tough conversations? Because it is through the tough conversations that we grow, when there's not the struggle, it's hard to see the growth. I mean, my campus knew some years ago that I decided to study French. And the big joke was that my students said, Doc, we think you're too old. You're just too old to do it. And that was all I needed. I was mid-60s. And so, we don't. I've been studying 8 years and competing with it. So I'm always quoting somebody. So I quote Apollinaire says, "La joie venait toujours après la peine." The joy comes after the struggle. That it takes working through it, whether it's a math problem, studying a poem, or going through a difficult conversation with colleagues about race or gender or LGBT, and people putting out their assumptions. You see. And the theme that what we used was this idea coming from students. We learned how to agree to disagree agreeably. That was one way we said it. The other one was learning how to agree to disagree with civility. And the language that I had people thinking about was, those the gods wish to destroy, they first make angry. Because when people are on opposing sides, because we always teach to win, everybody wants to overtalk the other, and people get angry. And so we had just so many conversations among students and faculty, and especially about politics. And I needed to model that behavior myself. And I'm such a passionate person that I wanted them to see me working hard, not to become too passionate, but rather to listen and to remain calm and to understand I had only one point of view and had to listen to others. And so because they all knew I was close with Barack, they needed to see me doing two things: defending my students who had voted for Mr. Trump, literally, and they're right to have done that, and saying to some of my colleagues, don't make people feel stupid if they voted for somebody different from you. And so when they saw some of my younger faculty beating up on me for saying that, they thought we hated each other, right? And we had to show them, no, we had different points of view, but we still respected each other. You get my point? But it was in that process of having the really honest disagreements that we could show we can have these conversations and learn from each other. And so, and to make that a part of the culture, and particularly because we have people from different cultures and different religions, a lot of them, as is the case now with the issues right now, we need to build a culture that will allow for those conversations. And right now, as you know, as I'm working with campuses around the country, people are not prepared to have the conversations without the extremists taking over. And the people in the middle are so uncomfortable that the loudmouths just take over and it becomes lacking in productivity. Long answer, but you get my point.
No, you've covered so many themes there, Freeman. They sort of resonate with some of the questions that our audience is thinking about. To this point of polarization,
yes,
we're in a moment where universities are seen as elitist, for the few. So there's a question here about what is your thinking about encouraging more diversity of thought?
yes.
Institutions of higher education are not seen as elite, rightly or wrongly, but that's the perception. How would you respond to that?
I do think we need the diversity of thought. If my folks in math here would appreciate that. And in any discipline, you know that sometimes people who have an idea that comes from a different angle that seems crazy sometimes can shed light on the overall picture. And so sometimes when people think very differently, we may not like what they're saying, but it can push us to be clearer in what we think. And also to just give and to look at things from somebody else's point of view. When some of my students could say to me from a very homogenous part of my state, when everybody's white, and say, well, my dad did vote for Mr. Barack, for Mr. Obama, and nothing happened to us. He promised some things to happen and they didn't happen. So we want to go with somebody who's going to shake things up. It helped me understand that most people don't understand that policy changes don't occur in 4 years to the extent that people immediately see the impact. You see what I'm saying? I didn't fully understand why people were so upset. You see, and so I would argue that we as educated, as professionals, as faculty, as scholars, as administrators, have to rise above our own individual thoughts about something to see if we can understand the perspectives of people different from ourselves, and then to help create a culture that encourages others to do that. And my challenge on my own campus was particularly with my younger faculty, and with some just very strong-willed faculty, regardless of age, who was, whether it was about that or about abortion or whatever, who really were bothered with some of my points of view. And I'll just say that in some cases, and it's not that I had the right point of view, but in some cases, what I decided to do was to use our shared governance approach and to say, okay, let's get our top faculty leaders and staff leaders and student leaders together. Let's say what we want to say is the leadership of this campus, because it's not just about what the president thinks. Because I want to say that we believe in the rights of women. Okay, now what do you all think? Let's just argue this out. And it doesn't mean it's the only view on this campus, but let's at least say what the leadership of the campus thinks. And so we could do that, but then I had some professors who were very angry at me, for doing that. And I said, well, let's sit down and talk about it. You got a right to be angry at me, but let's sit down and talk about it. But I do feel this way personally. And I asked our other leaders, you see what I'm saying? And, but it diversity of thought, let's talk it through and to see where we are. And in some cases, we didn't change our minds, but we did appreciate the other person's perspective. We did at least say why they were thinking as they were. And my goal was to have people not hating each other, disagreeing with the point of view, You see what I'm saying? But respecting the other person's right to have that point of view. And it was, and some of the issues were so personal, whether it's about your sister or your daughter. I mean, are you saying you really don't think she has a right to be in control of her body? And I would have to say, now, this is my personal point of view. It just so happens that the faculty senate president, the staff senate president, and the student all agree with me. You get my point. And but I had to also keep laughing to keep people from getting angry at me, because it doesn't help when everybody starts shouting at each other, So I'm saying diversity, yeah, we do need it. It's just so sad that we're at a point that so many leaders have made it personal, that people quickly make it personal rather than ideological or about difference of opinions in ideas. You see, that's the issue that I think and that's where we have to go. We've got to figure out how to come back to that. I mean, I have many friends who are Republicans. Oh yeah, I do, and many are in the middle. I have some friends who are Democrats who are not where I am. So it's not just party. It's not just about party. No, it is not. And some people get upset with me for saying that, but it's just true. You can't just say all Democrats are great, all Republicans. No, I think that's simplistic. No, depends on the issue. We've got to stop being so simplistic. And that's a part of diversity of thought, I would say.
Yeah. So several questions here about internal culture. There's one I'd like to take on the broader culture around us, and how do we speak to that? So one of the questions here is, wraparound services are critical. How do we convince policymakers
that
investing in them is worth the return on investment when some leaders only see our kids of color and poor whites as laborers and hourly workers? That social justice element of how do we as higher education then speak to social leaders in our communities?
Such a great question. This is where it seems to me that we have to work on how we prepare leaders in our society. This is what I say when I'm at really prestigious places, and they are so proud, even when I'm talking about the affirmative action issues, and they're thinking, oh, if you don't come to this place, if you don't get to come to one of these places, what's going to happen to you? And I'm saying there are so many wonderful places that they don't have that level of prestige, and people have great lives. They really do. So don't think it's all about the Northeast or all about certain parts of California. And then I say, and look at many of your graduates and what they're doing and how they have no interest in helping poor people and whatever. What can you say about your graduates? Do they care about these children? Because I don't care about how much money they make. I want to know what are their values. And my point is, these people who are leaders, I say this, I work with new presidents in the Harvard program, and I say this, we're all so bothered by much of Congress on one side, but in general, Congress, I said, all of them are our graduates. What does it say about a higher education when you look at, a lot, not just on one side. I mean, there you can find, I'm just saying, I think we have work to do in changing not just the thinking skills of people, but the hearts of people. I'm often thinking when people come across the stage, is this person really any different now from when they first came in here? Or did they just remain quiet and keep the same ideas and keep looking at and are just as condescending towards people as they were before they came, and what can we do? And I really worked hard to get to know the people that I knew were either bothered by my being president as a Black man or were condescending without even knowing I knew it. I really worked hard to get to know them and let them get to know me, because I knew it was only through getting to know me could I begin to change their hearts. And I only knew I was changing their hearts when they would tell me that deep, dark secret, which was their dad told them not to mingle with Black people. It's just the truth. It's just the reality of, it really is. And so I would say to you that we need to think about how we can reach more of our students, not about their grades, not about their, how do we reach them to have them having these meaningful conversations so that they're not just reinforcing what they've been taught all through society before they got to us. How do we determine not just they're graduating and getting a great job in technology or whatever, but that they will be, because they become these leaders that we're talking about for policies for these children. You see, that's the issue. And for me, service, getting to know these children and seeing the need for wraparound services, that is, I mean, looking into the face of a child and realizing that child is you, just didn't have the support. It's whether somebody's going to be a business person, a lawyer, a nurse, doc, whatever, if they can work with the children while in college, then they begin to have that sense that this child is connected to me and I should be connected to this child when I leave here in terms of what I do. We need that more than ever. We need people knowing that other people's children are our children more than ever. We really do. And we as universities need to be doing much more to help that happen. Yeah.
Loved how you framed that other people's children are our children.
They are. They are.
We can't only point, we can point fingers on occasion, but recognize that we need to look inwards.
That's it.
About what kinds of leaders are we producing?
Yeah.
In our country. Love it. Freeman, I have read your book, and
Yes.
I would recommend this to my colleagues in the community. I love the honesty with which you told the stories of culture change.
Yeah.
There are a couple of questions here on culture change. One says, I have learned that intimidation and bullying in academia is increasingly recognized by national organizations as a problem, in one case being identified as research misconduct. How do you understand this, and what do you suggest should be done to sort of address this kind of behavior?
Yeah, I think we have to call it out. We have to call it out. We really do, whether it's at the department level, division level, national agencies. I mean, when we see unethical actions, statements, or when people are not able to say what they really believe, you see, I think we do have to call it out. We really do. I've made statements. I've had my colleagues believe one way in something, and I've had groups, whether legislators or others, who wanted me to make them take the statement down. And I'm saying, no, that's their right. They're thinkers. No. I've had, believe it or not, I've actually had people go to the governor to try to make them do it. It's very interesting. Not this governor. This governor is he's my mentee. He's a Rhodes scholar. I'm very proud of him. And he's been my mentee 20 years. And he's got the right values. I'm very proud of him. He didn't go to UMBC, but he's got the right values, and I'm very proud of him. He believes in higher education. Westmore. But that was a period when I was getting intimidated, getting bullied, literally from a governor's office, except they said, you're not going to bully Freeman. But they were really trying to for me. And as this national organization was trying to bully my department in the humanities because of their belief in something. So I know it happens. And the question is, do people have the courage at different levels in the university even to support faculty and students when they speak up, even if we don't fully agree, but that there's an ethical responsibility to support people so that they're not being bullied. That's it. And to know excellent thinkers are not going to always think the same way or come to the same conclusion. That goes back to the diversity of thought. We don't want groupthink. We do want people who will think differently about things. We really do. I gave a talk at the American Academy of Arts and Sciences and was talking about the affirmative action issues. And there are questions that we have to raise on different sides. It's just one answer for all of that. There really are. My point is that we need opportunities to have thoughtful, deliberate conversations rather than the heated 5-minute on TV or social media things that don't get to the depth, to the real essence of the questions about what's best for students or for other people. That's what we need. And it takes time. It takes time to get there. I'm old school, but I know it takes time to really connect and understand the issue and look at the possible solutions and then weigh them. It doesn't happen like that. It just does not. No.
Yeah. And also the courage it takes to call out the behavior, right? That
Yeah.
then create the space for the kind of conversations that you're talking about. You're also talking about this in terms of preparing students. So it really applies to us all.
Yeah.
Everybody knows how much you have done for the African American community and the enormous successes UMBC has had under your leadership. So we have a question here. What would your advice be to young Black scientists who want to pursue a career in academia and create positive change in higher education for the next generation of Black students? How can they make the biggest impact?
It's a great question. You know, my greatest honor first is the Myhoff Scholars, but let me say two things. But let me just say also the Myhoffs, for example, right now are maybe 55% of color, Black and Latino, but 40% white and Asian. And I'm as proud of them because they are committed to broadening diversity too. I want to say that it's very important. Just as this new Hrabowski Scholars Program with Howard Hughes is about half and half. And I'm proud of both groups, those Black and Latino, and then the white and Asians, because they can all have very diverse labs. Let me start there. And that Howard Hughes one, I said to Michael and you, that's $1.5 billion. And ASU should be going for one this next time, because these people get almost $1 million a year for 10 years. It's really worth it. Now, with that said, going back to Blacks and other people of color, it's the same thing I said to women, because I led the advanced program on our campus for years, that grant. This is what I would say. Number one, people will pull on that minority, that Black and women scientists, to be involved in so much that the person must be able to prioritize. That particularly at a place like ASU or UMBC, when there's a research campus, that the number one goal must be to get the research done. Very important. To do solid teaching, but to get that research done. And the challenge is, because there's so few Blacks and people of color, everybody wants them to do something. And it's really important to know how to graciously say, please excuse me, but right now I can't do it so much. Because the research must be first. I know so many people who spread themselves too thinly because everybody was asking, and they didn't get tenure. And you've got to be able to say to students and others, listen, you got to get this work done. Now you can bring a couple of students into that lab, you can help out. But getting that research done first, very, very important. And people will say, well, but I want to care about the students. You have plenty of time. I mean, care about one or two students. And when students want you to listen to their problems, your job is to get them to a counselor, because you've not been trained as a counselor. And you can be as gracious and kind and say, let me get you to somebody who's really good, who can listen to you, okay? But don't, because if you get into the habit of being known as a good listener, everybody will want to tell you their problems. No, I had to learn that. And I had to learn how to love them and get them connected to the right person. Otherwise, all of my time was going to go into listening. Okay. And so my first, get the research done, because you can help so many more students of color and others if you are that tenured faculty member. And you're still going to keep working to keep going to full professor, because we have so few Black tenured full professors in our country in STEM in general. You know, but you want, so balancing, it's the genius of the and versus tyranny of the or. It's not that you ignore those students, but you want to find creative ways of giving some time. And then the other thing I say is, when people want you to give talks and things like that, video a couple of good talks that people can use out in the schools, community, where they can see you and where you give a good talk. But you don't have a lot of time to go out into schools and that kind of, no, but give it so they can see that you exist. You know, you do it once and get it, and then they can use you that way. And then just give them that video that they can use. Best thing, I've seen that really work really well. That's my answer. Very important. Get the research done.
Yeah, be role models, but make sure that you protect and preserve your time to advance yourself, the scholarship, so that you can bring more people.
Because you can do so much more once you get tenured and you've established your research record, and you can get grants, and you can have grad students who can help you with students and all of that. But do not, and then just, and you should have a mentor, somebody in that department or wherever, who can give you advice about when to say no and when not to. You know, you got to have somebody who can help you to know how to graciously say, please forgive me, but I'm just overwhelmed right now. I can't do any more right now. I need time. You got to learn how to graciously say no. Very important. Too often, minorities and women will say yes, and they get spread so thinly. And what suffers? Their research and their future. I saw that with advance. We had to really work to teach women, do not continue to say yes, because the guys were saying no and getting tenure, and the women were doing service and not getting tenure. That sounds stereotypical, but it still happens. So please think about it.
Yeah. That is really good advice.
Yeah.
So much of your work has been building relationships between groups and institutions and organizations. And so we have a question here about how have you approached the building of coalitions between institutions, between your university and government, between institutions and community? What typically gets in the way, and how do you get through it?
Sure. So first of all, something that I know both Boyer and Frank Rhodes believed in, and I know Michael Rhodes believes in it. It's all about people, number one, and building relationships with the people. Number two, some people are really good in connecting with people. Other people are just good at solving problems, technical problems. And you got to find those who are good with people and those who want to learn how to be good with people. Some people really just don't want to deal with that. But some people will say, Freeman, take me with you. Let me learn how to do this. So we, for example, are very, very connected to the intelligence community. We're the number one producer of talent for NSA. All right. And it was a matter of getting to know the right people there. Paul Nakasani is the head. I gave a talk to the top leadership there from around the world. But we've got 1,200 graduates at NSA right now. Large numbers of our students work as high school students at NSA on really good math problems. Even good. And this is why our kids are so good. They've already worked in cyber and in mathematics. And so we got these partnerships but because of our proximity to all the national agencies, and we have developed, whether it's NIH and the institutes, all of them are there in the Baltimore Washington corridor, except for the Environmental Institute, which is down in North Carolina. So we've got partnerships with all those institutes and relationships with scientists and faculty. Same thing with Hopkins, as you might imagine, the medical school downtown. But we've also built partnerships with other universities for students to go back and forth, and faculty collaboration. Some have been developed by faculty. The head of APL, the Applied Physics Lab at Hopkins, is a UMBC graduate, has his PhD in computer science. So with our alumni being at these places, they pull a number of people, and that helps tremendously. But the other thing I would say is that we have worked to place over the years students in both companies and federal agencies with the goal of having them as ambassadors. So Social Security Administration, believe it or not, is 15 minutes from our campus. Medicare and Medicare are 15 minutes from our campus. So for people in public policy, health policy, just large numbers of students doing internships. So we talk about multi-level partnerships, meaning faculty collaboration and research, meaning internships for undergrad and grad, meaning jobs for people, meaning getting grants, but getting fundraising, meaning alumni giving, all those layers for companies and agencies. And I would say most important, the two areas would be building research dollars, and then second, with those national agencies, but secondly, helping to shape new programs that we want, because that's one of the things that when we think about innovation, we're thinking about the question we ask a lot. First of all, I'm always quoting I. Rabi, the Nobel laureate in physics, who grew up in New York and got the Nobel Prize in the 40s. He said when he was growing up, all of his friends' mothers would ask the question of their kids when they came home from school, what'd you learn in school today? He said, not my Jewish mother. My mother would say, Izzy, did you ask a good question today? So we have a kind of a general principle that the coolest kids on our campus, faculty also, are those who ask good questions. We really celebrate the person who can ask a good question that we haven't thought about. That's one way of putting it, all right? Another way I always say, I'm looking for the auditor in the room, and that is the people who serve on the audit committees. Because the number one question that for the audit committee is, what is it we really haven't thought about? Because the comfort level comes when people think, well, we've already thought of everything to be thought about. Well, that's never the case. Part of innovation is knowing we have never covered the territory. There's always something, whether you're talking about risk management or whatever, there's always something we've not thought about. And we want everybody thinking, what are we missing here? And when we think things are really good, that's when we need to be careful. And that's when I say success is never final. There's something here we're missing, whether it's about the students or about issues involving the state of Maryland, And so the key for me in all of that is constantly celebrating robust questioning and debating with civility, but really having fascinating conversations that result in everybody leaving still trying to figure it out. It's like that math problem that sounds so simple that is not as simple as people think, right? And I always say when people give me an answer, if they give me an answer and they're wrong, they owe me $1,000. We like the kind of problems. When I work with the international math competition, what I always love is that some of the students from some countries are accustomed to thinking about a problem all night. In America, we just think the problem should be solved like that. But the best problems, you have to keep thinking about them in any discipline, right? That's what we should have on campus, where we are constantly thinking about these problems and constantly shaping solutions. That's a part of that innovation ecosystem for our companies on campus. One of our major problems is how do we broaden participation in the companies? We've got about 130 biotech and IT companies on campus. We needed more women CEOs. We needed more people of color, and we were able to write grants to NIH and NSF for women entrepreneurs and to train more women in biotech and other areas, but that was somebody coming up with those ideas, and now we're on it, but it takes that to keep moving to the next level. That's the idea.
No, that's, there's so much work to be done in sort of building those coalitions to eventually have the kind of successes that you've had. Yes. In so many areas. It's slow, hard work. And I want to put a pin on what you said about the learning to ask the good questions and staying with the problem. Yeah. We are now in this era of chat GPT, and everybody has at one click away from instantly getting a solution.
Right.
We've had many convenings here at ASU, and I'm sure everybody's talking about this. How are you thinking about this? How do we train people for dialogue and sitting with heavy problems where you can get one click away, you can get something?
But this is what, Anupam Joshi is one of our experts. He's been chair of computer science, and he and I were just talking about this, preparing for a talk that he's going to be giving. And, we can get solutions, but the quality of the solutions we get from ChatGPT will depend on the quality of the questions. And it goes back to that point that our job is to teach our students and ourselves to ask better questions, you see. And so I think there are ways in which we can use artificial intelligence to make us better thinkers, because it really is in being able to conceptualize the problem in such a way that we come up with these hard questions so that the answering of the question becomes less the big deal than coming up with the right question, is what I would say. And that's what people don't really understand. I saw that when I was working with a group of kids with ChatGPT, and they kept asking questions that Siri could solve. They were just factual kinds of things. And it was clear to me they were not thinking critically. They were not going deeply enough to get to that. And that's what I think we need to be thinking about. How do we teach people to think deeply so that they can push ourselves to come up with those right questions? That's going to be a part of it. And to be able to look at the distinction between what artificial intelligence will come up with an answer and what will we add to whatever artificial intelligence says. That's going to be the interesting part as we go through this. And to keep an open mind rather than simply, I'm seeing this in every sector, healthcare, the financial. How do we keep an open mind rather than saying, no, it's no good? No, no. Our challenge is to take whatever is good from it and make it better to help us out, to make sure we're using it as a tool rather than it controlling us. You know, but the worst thing we can do is just to be closed-minded and say we can't use that. No, no.
Yeah, you left us with a good question. What can we add to artificial intelligence and take advantage of all the positives that come with it? Sure. So you ended your lecture with a challenge for the ASU community on improving outcomes and preparing our Hispanic and Latino students for careers and in the STEM areas and beyond. Yep. And there's a question here that relates to that. Universities play a pivotal role for the nation's research enterprise. Do you believe that the large universities have a role to play in supporting and helping smaller minority-serving institutions?
No, I do. I really do. I think there should be partnerships. We work with a variety of institutions with faculty exchanges and collaboration and research in writing grants together and in opportunities for students, undergraduates and grad students, and in looking at the quality of the enterprise. I mean, one of the things that many larger research universities don't understand is that there's wide variation in quality among MSIs or among HBCUs or among Hispanic serving institutions. And one of the challenges of a large institution like ASU is to become more sophisticated in being able to distinguish the level of quality of these institutions and to understand what questions one has to ask in order to determine that. For example, I can name one institution of an HBCU where I can easily say, show me a dozen people who've gone on to find grad schools in this discipline and done well. And another, I can say, show me 2 or 3, and I know they haven't, you see. So it depends on the institution if they've been able to do it. And the question that an ASU has asked, what type of institution do you want to work with? You know, and I've often said, the worst thing that any institution do is to work with some place that does not have any record of success, to bring in students who bum out, because then your faculty will think all of the institutions are like that. The best thing an institution can do is to have some success first, because what you're talking about is the faculty have to see that there's that potential for success before they can become more excited about the possibility. Nobody wants to work and after a year or two realize it was a disaster. If you're going to have these kinds of initiatives, make sure you're starting with some level of success by not assuming you know. I told Harvard the same thing as they're deciding to work with some HBCUs. Got to have some level of success. And there is wide variation there when thinking about it by discipline, by institution, you see, by students. Don't assume one is like the next. No. Just as there wide variation in any ethnic group. My Black students, I've got 20% are Black, but I've got students who are from inner city Baltimore and others who are from Jamaica or from Barbados or from Nigeria and Lagos. I have a Caribbean Student Association and a Caribbean American Student Association. The kids from DC whose parents are from Jamaica are very American. What's up, Doc? My kids who are from Barbados, how are you today, sir? You see, they're quite British, right? They think their cousins who grew up in DC are very crude, right? And they're distinct. I'm just saying, in terms of students of color, don't assume any one group is just the same. It's very important, very important. Yeah.
There are so many conversations here and, around us around quality. Yeah. And you have a chapter in your book, The Empowered University, on the challenge of quality. And as we're talking about these diverse groups of learners who need to be trained to be good citizens, critical thinkers, and all of this, how do you answer the question about the challenge of quality?
Yeah, the first thing first of all, we look at the discipline and we look at the level of skills of the student. Reading skills are important for any discipline. A certain level of reading skills are very important, very important. We can determine we can just, at this point, using analytics, we can tell you whether a student has a reasonable chance of making it in mechanical engineering based on math background, school the person is from, grades, and talking to the student. Fire in the belly really does matter. Fire in the belly. I mean, and people will say test scores don't matter. Test scores do matter. They're ranges, though. I can't say I've had Black kids with perfect math scores who've almost flunked out because they were arrogant. The test score doesn't tell you all that. No, there are many other factors. Because I wrote the questions for the math SAT for years. It's just algebra. So it's just, it's not like it's that big a deal. But the fact is, the ability to work hard and to work with other people and to take advice, right, and to never give up, those qualities are more important. I can see somebody who has a score that's lower, but not too low, but we can look at what that range is, who has those other skills and those qualities and is willing to work with us. The kind of qualities that a first-generation American kid has who may come from another country, quite frankly, and that's just real. And you get that kid from Baltimore working with that kid from Barbados or whatever, and they work together really hard, and they both will make it. And they both will make it, you see? So those personal qualities, and we talk about that in that summer bridge program. If people haven't look at the 60 Minutes piece on the Meyerhoff program. It's like a boot camp. It's really tough. A lot of tough love and an emphasis on both the love and the toughness, very much so. We take their phones from them. All right. I get a lot of hate mail for that reason. Right? Wait a minute. And what people don't realize is I wasn't the one who decided to take that. The people who decided to take their phones were the students who were finishing one summer when asked the question, what could we have done to make your group closer? And the student said, you should have taken our phones away during the week. Then we wouldn't have been talking to our high school friends. So it was the student's recommendation, but I get the hate mail.
That's the price you pay for leadership, right?
That's what you pay. That's exactly right.
I know we are coming to the end of our time together. There's a question here I think that's really would love for you to address. There are many, but this is one I'd like you to speak to. The question is, the young may lack direction or confidence. They may not have the role models that lead them to consider leadership roles. How do we reach and inspire the next generation to move beyond their comfort zones, to step up and be champions of change?
Oh, it's great. And I've got, if you look at my list of articles, there's one there on a theory of change that talks about a particular minority student success. And it's got this approach that focuses on the university being intentional in pulling students. And we started with minority students, but then we went to all kinds of students to pull them into mainstream activities of governance of the university and to give them opportunities to lead. I enjoy and got colleagues to enjoy bringing students into important meetings with people from the outside and having students present. And we do a lot, I know you do too. We have large numbers of undergraduates who publish in referee journals, large numbers, and who present. And we are constantly making the point that not only in the social sciences and humanities, but we need to teach engineers and scientists how to talk to the public about their discipline. Very important, and not turn people off, quite frankly. But most important, the more connecting professionals are with those students to help them develop that sense of self and to believe in themselves, the more likely those students will begin to say, I could do that. I could do that. When I tell my students that I had speech impediments as a child, I had a lisp, I couldn't pronounce certain words. And after I had been in jail with Dr. King, people wanted me to speak to represent the civil rights movement and the youth movement. And I did it, but I was really with difficulty in speaking. And, but I was asked because I was one of the few kids who was not from the projects, who was not so poor that couldn't get them to come. And those poor kids, by the way, who went to jail with me are now dead. Most of them are dead because poor people don't live this long. That's the sad truth about poverty. I have to say that on behalf of them, all right? But the key is that when my students hear me say, I couldn't say Hrabowski that I was Hrabowski. I mean, literally, I sounded like a Tweety bird. And kids would laugh at me. And they would say, well, how did you get it? I said, I had to work on it. I had to work on the lisp and whatever. And then they see that anybody they might see as being a good speaker didn't start off that way. You have to work on those things. And then when I tell them my hands would shake so much, that no, I didn't start off just speaking. No, I was scared. So I think we as leaders, as faculty, have to tell our stories. Nobody just starts off being the great orator. No. We have to tell our stories. And we have to show people that we have vulnerabilities. With young presidents, but with young faculty, during the mental health time, during the COVID, we decided as leaders to talk about our challenges. And I said, when I was a younger leader, my doctors told me I would have my first heart attack before I was 40 because I was so tense and I was taking things so seriously as an administrator, right? That I did develop high blood pressure. I was eating too much. I wasn't exercising and those things, and I had to start working on my health. And when I work with new provosts, deans, and presidents, when they say, what's the most important thing to do? I said, number one, take care of your health. Because without your health, it's hard to do anything else. Emotional and physical health, spiritual health, right? And number two, I tell them, be an honest person. Don't lie. Because once you lie to people, they will never trust you. Don't lie. Tell the truth. And when you make a mistake, own it. Own it. I've made so many mistakes. And I just tell people, I did my best. I need your help. Show your vulnerability. And most people will say, come on, Freeman, let's work on it together. But if you lie and hide it, it's hard to get that trust. And so I have found that the best way to pull people into this work is by being sincere, comfortably vulnerable, and letting younger people know, whether they are 17 or 30, I've been there. Oh yeah, when I hear the introduction, it sounds so great. No, I'm just this little chubby black kid nerd from Birmingham. And believe me, people appreciate the sincerity. They do. They really do.
What a fantastic note on which to end the conversation. I could talk to you forever, and our community has a lot of other questions, but we want to be respectful of your time. I love what you left with us to say, tell those stories.
Yeah,
bring more people into the fold. Yes. Everybody's children are our children. We have a collective responsibility. Yes. Freeman, your story has inspired many of us for so many years. Thank you for being the leader that you are and being that role model for the broader higher education community. We are so honored that you accepted our invitation and shared your thoughts, perspectives, and wonderful stories with us today. We hope you'll come out here and visit with us in person. We wish you luck for your new book and all the wonderful things you're doing and the incredible legacy you're leaving behind in so many ways.
I appreciate that, Manu. I am connected to ASU and to Michael Crow. He's my dear friend, and to Derek Anderson, who is one of yours from ACE. I'm the Centennial Fellow there, so I'm working with him and Ted Mitchell, and we talk about ASU. It's a wonderful model, and I'm looking forward to coming out and just walking around and saying hello to people. So get me out there soon, okay?
We'll get you out here. And thank you to everybody that participated. Have a good weekend. Everybody be safe, be well. We'll see you here again at the next Frank Rhodes lecture. Bye.
Keep hope alive, folks. Keep hope alive. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Thank you.